1980X. Sounds like a skateboarding event, like the X Games, but yeah, this game is just as rad, but with a fat caveat. See, on the surface, 1980X is a simple collection of 5 arcade games, and it immediately drops you into a beat 'em up. There's a killer soundtrack, the pixel art just pops, and then you hear all the retro sound effects, and if you grew up with arcades, you'll probably get hit with a wave of nostalgia. But right when you start getting into a groove and you get all hyped up to fight the boss, the camera just decides to start drifting away, and you're just like, what the fuck? See, 1980X is actually about a coming-of-age story, and a relatively somber one at that, if the narration is anything to go by.
Soon the cars below would reach the city. But me, I'd still be here, stuck in sleepy suburbia.
The story is about a kid who has several problems at home and school, and often feels trapped and tied down by obligations of growing up, adulthood, and so forth. And that's when they discover video games and how liberating they can feel. For some, this is a story that will either really resonate with you like it did for me, or maybe will bore you out of your mind. So yeah, 1980X uses homages to classic video games to convey themes of escapism, and sometimes you just want to escape and get as far away as possible. And what do you know, the next game takes place in outer space. Out of the Void. This one is a space shooter, but oh boy, is this one freaking satisfying. You get to play what feels like a complete level, as opposed to the first game, which feels like a snippet. You have a charge shot and you can collect upgrades. There's explosions, giant ships, robots, asteroids, lasers, pretty much everything the kid inside of me thinks is cool. After a few crashes and getting backhanded, the boss is defeated, some epic music starts playing, and then the boss escapes and you're in hot pursuit as everything explodes. But then, the freaking bell rings and you gotta go to school. A feeling I assume many of us can relate to when things are just getting good. The next day at school, you see, at least in terms of the kid's eyes, the coolest person ever. Someone who's just vibing and looks like they're completely free and can go anywhere they wanted. So to experience this sense of freedom, our main character starts up a racing game. Now I really dig this next game because I love racing in a pixelated environment. It's very reminiscent of Top Gear for the SNES. But it does kind of suck that for this game you're not actually racing anyone, and once you make it out of the tunnel, it switches to a long narration as you drive into the night.
Down here, I was free. I was in control. No one told me where to go or what to do. The only bad part about it was having to come back up to the real world.
It's pretty neat from a narrative standpoint when 1980X forces you to stop playing a game, which is perfectly in line with the story's themes and whatnot, but in terms of gameplay, it kinda sucks. Feeling like you barely got a taste of something right as it was getting good. It's like getting a sample of a new flavor at some ice cream shop, only to realize some bully took your lunch money earlier and you can't afford it. At this point, the kid talks about how as you get older, you kinda lose that sense of wonder and imagination. Simple things like shadows, which become less scary, also become a lot less exciting and mysterious. Which brings us to our next game, Shadow Play. Personally, out of the 5 games, probably the most challenging and fun. Now this one is an action game where you're side-scrolling and you're constantly running. You gotta do your best to cut down the enemies in your path and avoid all the traps and such. Of course, there's one final challenge as you had to escape from a shadowy creature very similar to No Face from Spirited Away.
And now, I wasn't sure our family would ever be able to put the pieces back together.
The final game is called Kill Screen, an RPG dungeon crawler, which tries to convey life at home for the kid, especially with his mom, and how he feels trapped. So we gotta defeat 3 dragons, escape the maze, as well as defeat Motherboard. Motherboard? Yeah. As you make your way through the maze, you'll encounter monsters, and in typical RPG fashion, you'll try to figure out their weakness, defeat them, and get XP to level up. You are limited in the number of heals you have, so you'll probably die, but if you do, you'll just respawn and you'll keep your levels. And while this is very fitting for 1980X in terms of its narrative, it's just kind of boring to kind of end your game on a RPG slog. Anyways, once you're strong enough, you'll defeat the dragons, which you might notice are named things like Pain and Grief, and then you'll encounter the final boss. But as the fight plays out, the power goes out at the arcade, and it feels really anticlimactic. And then slowly, you watch as all your other gaming experiences appear around you, and I assume the main character will use these gaming experiences to help push them forward in the future as they grow up.
The game was not over. It was just beginning.
But the game is over because we had to wait for part 2. At the end of the day, the story may or may not be for you, but I really liked it. There's a lot of love and care put into this game. Just know that 1980X is on the short side, as I finished it under an hour, and it's not a completed story. Also, I think it'll help if you don't look at this as a standard game, but more of a story experience. And if I had to be completely honest, out of the 5 games, only 2 really left me satisfied and felt like I had my fill. But hey, if you like this, it'd be pretty rad if you subscribed. Let me know any thoughts you have, and I hope to see you around. Bye-bye.